Today I'm going to show you how to build a pre-purchase checkout UI extension for your Shopify store using Gadget. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new Gadget app. I'll call it pre-purchase checkout extension demo. It's a long enough slug there. And that will create my new Gadget app, which gives me a Postgres database, serverless Node backend, and hosted React frontend. First thing I'm going to do is connect to Shopify. Go ahead and click this button. I'm going to do a partners connection. We always recommend doing a partners connection. It does give you the ability to build app extensions, which we obviously need, as well as embedded front ends, which we're going to use to select a product to be offered in the checkout. So I'm going to go to my partners dashboard. I'm on the apps page already. I will create a new app, create an app manually. Call it pre-purchase checkout extension. Awesome. And now I will copy over my client ID and secret back to Gadget. Press connect. This is the API scopes and model selection page. So here you pick what Shopify API scopes you want your app to have access to and what Shopify data models you want to import into your Gadget database. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the read product scope and the Shopify product data model. I'm going to go down and press confirm. Now, if you ever want to edit your connection, change your API scopes or models, you can always do that later. So you don't need to know all your API scopes and models up front. You'll notice that the Shopify product data model was indeed added to my Gadget app, as well as sync GDPR request and shop models, which are just defaults we create for you every time you connect to Shopify. Next thing I'm going to do is copy my app URL and redirection URL here to my partner's app. Go to the app setup tab, and I will paste my app URL and do the same thing for my redirection URL. And I will save these values. Perfect. Last thing I need to do is install my app on a store. So I'm going to go ahead and select a store. This is just a development store right now. I will install on checkout branding testing. You don't have to write any auth code with Gadget. It's all handled for you. So I can just immediately install my app on my store. And once my app is installed, Gadget actually sets up an embedded app template for me. So this is fantastic. And this is all being rendered with React code found in shop page JSX. So if I go back to Gadget here, we get this little pop-up, tells us what we just accomplished with our connection. So we mirrored Shopify resources. That's our Shopify product model. We also registered for webhooks. So if I go into my Shopify product model and look at the create or update or delete actions, you can see that Shopify webhooks is a trigger. So anytime a product is changed in Shopify, we'll get that webhook and your Gadget database will stay in sync with the Shopify store. There's also a sync API. We're going to touch on that next. And then we have our embedded admin front end. So if we go into the front end folder, we see there's shop page JSX, which is being used to build this template. We're going to modify that in a second as well. But first, like I said before, let's go to syncing. So I'm just going to close this box here. There's a button you can press, but I'll show you the long way to get to the sync button. You can click on connections, go to Shopify, and then you see we have shop installs. Click on that. And we can press the sync button. So this will sync my Shopify product data from my development store into my Gadget database. There's also a way to do this programmatically where you can automatically sync data when you install your app on a store. For more information, check out our documentation. So I can see that my sync was a success. If I go to my Shopify product model, click on data, I see, yep, I have Shopify product data. So that's exactly what I wanted to see. So the next thing we're going to do is modify our embedded front end. We're going to just do a simple front end so we can select a product that will be offered during the checkout. So that will be our pre-purchase offer. So I'm just going to copy code directly from the tutorial write-up and paste it into shop page JSX, and then I'll explain it. So here we go. I've pasted the code. If I flip over, you see Gadget does have hot module reloading, including with front end. So I didn't have to refresh my admin page. It just updated automatically. I'm going to walk through some of the important bits of the shop page file I just pasted in. This is just a React app. So I'm able to use React's hooks, use effect, use state, use callback. So I'm going to define some React state just for whatever the currently selected product is, as well as the product options being fed into my dropdown. So you can see this is my dropdown. These are the options. When I select a product, that is the selected product state. This is where things start to get very interesting because we're using some of Gadget's hooks that come from the Gadget Inc. React package. So here we're using useFindMany to read our Shopify product data from our Gadget backend. And we're using useFindFirst to read the Shopify shop information. Specifically, we're just selecting the shop ID. Gadget automatically applies shop tenancy to any Shopify models that are imported into your Gadget app, which means that my shop, which is called Checkout Branding Testing, will only ever be able to grab products that are stored in that shop, as well as my Checkout Branding Testing Shopify shop information. So this will just get me the ID of my currently installed shop, which is fantastic. For more information on using these React hooks, you can check out our documentation. I will also say that our product tagger tutorial does a more step-by-step build through reading and writing using Gadget API. So that's another good one to go through if you haven't built an embedded front end with Gadget before. So all this is doing is reading product and shop data. The return from these hooks give us 3 objects. So there's data, which will actually be our return data. So it will be products or our shop information. There's a fetching parameter, which is just a Boolean. We can use that to show loading spitters or some sort of loading state. And there's an error. We don't use the error object in this tutorial, but you can use error to display an error message, do error handling, or whatever you need to do when you encounter an error. We have a React useEffect hook that we're just using to populate our product options. So that, once again, is the options that will be available in our dropdown. And we're just passing in data, which is our return product information, as an input. We have a use callback hook that is going to be used to save our selection. So right now, all it's doing is printing to the console. So if I flip back here, press save, nothing actually happens. If I open the console, it would just be printing to the console itself. We're going to hook that up next. Finally, if I go to our returned and rendered components, this is all just Polaris. So Polaris comes pre-installed when you connect to Shopify. So we have this page component with a primary action. So that is actually providing this save button for us. We do some loading with a spinner. And then once again, we just have this select component, which is just our dropdown. We're passing in our product options, which is our React state that was populated in our useEffect hook. We have an onChange, which is calling our callback. And then value is just the selected product. So once again, set selected product, that's our hookup here. Save selection is being called on our button press. But once again, that isn't doing anything yet. So let's allow ourselves to actually write our selection back to Gadget and somehow store this selected product so we can use it in our Checkout UI extension. So what we need to do is actually save this product's ID. So when I select a product here, I need to save its ID in a metafield that can then be used as input into my Checkout UI extension. So I need to build an additional action in Gadget that handles that for me, takes that product ID and saves it to a metafield. I'm going to go to my Shopify shop model. I'm going to store this metafield on the shop. It's going to be a shop-owned metafield. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually create a new action. I'm going to go ahead and call this action save pre-purchase products. And I'm going to click to add a code snippet as a success effect. And once again, I'm just going to copy and paste code from the tutorial and then walk through it. Gadget code effects give you a high context parameter that give you everything you need to interact with your Gadget API as well as Shopify. At the very bottom of this code snippet, I've also defined a custom parameter. So in this case, I do want to pass in the product ID. So I need to define it as an incoming string parameter, which allows me to pull it from the params object as part of this high context param for my serverless function. Then all I'm doing is I'm grabbing my current Shopify connection using this connections object, and I'm making a GraphQL request. So this is just calling Shopify's metafields set API. This is found in their API docs. And I'm just creating a single metafield. I'm giving it a key and a namespace. So the key is hard-coded to pre-purchase product. The namespace is Gadget tutorial. I am setting the current shop as the owner, so this will be a shop-owned metafield. I am setting it to a product reference type. And the actual value of this metafield, note that it does have to be passed in as a string, is the GID product ID. So that's fantastic. So now when I run this action, all it should do is save my currently selected product to a metafield in Shopify. Finally, I use the logger to print the response to the Gadget logs, just so we can use that for debugging. Okay, there's one more thing I want to do. I actually want to bring my metafield, because it's shop owned, I actually want it to display in my Gadget database. So I can go ahead and add a field for this metafield, and we can call it pre-purchase product. We can store data from a Shopify metafield, and then all we're doing is copying over our namespace and key. So in this case, our namespace was Gadget tutorial. I can go ahead and register that namespace. Our key was pre-purchase product. Perfect. I can also always just pull these values or double check in here. So key is pre-purchase product, namespace is Gadget tutorial. The metafield type will be a product reference. It's only going to be one product reference. And I can leave this as a string type in my Gadget database. So now if I go to my Shopify shop data page, I can scroll over, you can see currently there's null, so we don't have anything saved. But now we can go ahead and hook up our front end app and make it so that it calls our new Shopify shop action to save that product ID to a metafield, and we will get some data here. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the first thing I'm going to do is if I go to the settings page and then roles and permissions, you see I have a Shopify app users role. This defines what actions are able to be called by embedded app users by default. So I'm going to go ahead and find my save pre-purchase product action on my Shopify shop model and enable it for Shopify app users. So this will enable us to actually call our new action. Perfect. The next thing I'm going to do is go back into shop page JSX, and I will allow us to write our selected product ID. So I'm going to go ahead and import a new hook. It's going to be called use action. So the use action hook allows us to make non-read requests to our Gadget API. And then I will just paste in our example of using use action. So here we're using the use action hook on our new action on the Shopify shop model. So it's just api.shopifyshop.save pre-purchase product. Similar to our read requests, our use action hook returns a data object, a fetching object, and an error object. The other key thing returned from this is a save product function. This is the function we're actually going to call in order to save our product and run our action in Gadget. So let's do that next. Let's update our use callback hook. I'm just going to get rid of the console log and do a paste. So there's an if statement just checking to make sure we have shop data, which is just our shop ID, as well as the selected product. And if those things are present, we're going to call our save product function that was defined with our use action hook. We're going to send the shop ID as a parameter, as well as the product ID. So that's our custom parameter defined in our code file, which will send in the product ID so that we can save it as a metafield. Fantastic. I am just going to also update our component here, or component tree. Let's paste that in. So I've added a little banner here when we get a save response. So this will be the data returned from save. You can see we say a banner that will say, hey, we've saved our pre-purchase product. We're also using fetching, which we've aliased as saving, to just disable the button so we don't click the button like crazy. We debounce it a little bit. Okay, so let's go back over to our admin UI. I'm going to just refresh the page. Hot module reloading does have a couple minute timeout, so I'm just refreshing because I went into in-depth explanation. Make sure we have the latest stuff loaded up. And I'm going to go ahead and select our Oxygen snowboard. I'll press save. And our pre-purchase product was saved, so that's good. Let's go check it out in Gadget. If I go to my Shopify shop model, the data page, and scroll way over, we see, yep, okay, we've got a product ID saved. So that's all looking good. We have our metafield populated. Now all we need to do is build our checkout UI extension. So I'm going to go ahead. I will open up a terminal here. Let's clear it out. I'm going to start by creating a new Shopify app. So I'm going to go Shopify/app. I'm going to build it first and then do a bit of an explanation. It's going to take, a minute or two to actually roll out. So I'll do the explanation while it is setting up. Pre-purchase, extension demo. I'm going to select node, and Shopify will create a new app. So we do need to use the Shopify CLI to build our extensions. That's all we need to use it for. So normally if you're building a Shopify app and you're using the CLI, you might use the web folder or the front end folder to actually house other parts of your app. Gadget's taking care of all that. We're actually just going to delete those folders. So we just need the CLI to use as a scaffold to generate our extensions. We also build our extensions, and it allows us to preview them in a checkout. Shopify actually hosts all of our extension code. So that's checkout UI extensions or functions if you're building functions. We're not going to cover it in this tutorial, but Shopify hosts all that code for you. So Gadget's going to host your app's database, backend, and front-end code. Shopify hosts all of your extension code. You don't need to use any other parts of the Shopify CLI if you don't want to. So we're going to walk through that once this is done being set up. Looks like it's almost done. It's just, there we go. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go into my pre-purchase extension demo app. I'm actually going to start it up right away. Actually, I'm not going to start it up right away. I want to generate my extension first. I will open it up in VS Code. So we'll go projects, pre-purchase extension demo. Fantastic. So you see we have this web folder here. That's what I was talking about. We can just go ahead and delete the whole thing. Perfect. And now we can go ahead and generate our extension. So I'm just going to use this snippet here. You can also leave out the type and name, and Shopify will prompt you to select them, but I am just going to leave it in. This is what we have in the tutorial right now. I'm going to select the same partners organization I used to connect my Gadget app to Shopify. I am not going to create a new app. This is very important. I want to connect to the same app I used, once again, to connect my Gadget app to Shopify, because we want to build everything under the same app. And then I'm going to select JavaScript React. So you can see we get an extensions folder right away. Shopify will install dependencies, and we are good. So now I will start up my app. And if I take a peek at my extensions folder, this is good. This is the default extension. So you get a TOML file, which is your extension configuration. And then in the source folder, you get index.js, which is your actual extension code. So like I said before, the default is just a banner. We're going to preview this banner. I have started my development app here. I do want to make sure I select the same store that I installed my Gadget app on. Checkout branding testing. So we're just going to go ahead and preview this default extension first. It will just be a banner. Copy the URL over from the dev console. And in our checkout, cool. So this is our extension right here. It's just a banner. Let's go ahead and update it now. So I'll flip back to VS Code. Perfect. So the first thing we're going to modify is this TOML file. So we need to do two things here. We need to set our metafield as input. Shopify actually gives us some examples here. And then we need to allow our extension to have API access to make a storefront request. So I'm just going to do the metafield first, paste this in. So this is our namespace and key. We're just setting this metafield as input. And finally, to give our extension storefront API access, I just have API access set to true under capabilities. So that's all the modifications we need to make to our TOML file. Now let's go ahead and update index.js. I am once again just going to paste a whole bunch of code here. Now, I'm not going to lie, 90% of this code is taken directly from Shopify's own pre-purchase tutorial. I'm not going to go through this in depth because now this is all just dealing with Shopify API. Your Gadget part is kind of done after you finish building your admin app and storing your metafield. I will walk through some of the important parts though. Shopify does have a very specific and limited API for checkout extensions, so you do have to use this API. The nice part is Shopify handles a bunch of stuff for you. So for example, we have this use apply cart lines change React hook that gives us a function to actually apply changes to our cart. So this is how we actually add our product to our cart. The one piece that I've added that is different from Shopify's tutorial is that we are using app metafields. So there's a use app metafields hook that pulls in our metafield defined in the TOML file. So this is our pre-purchase product. There's some React state for holding what the product is, different states like loading, adding, or show error. Then there's a use effect hook, which is where we're doing a storefront API request. This is once again very similar to Shopify's tutorial, except we are using this pre-purchase product ID as an input variable. So into our query, we're only grabbing the single product, and we're just grabbing the title, the first image associated with this product, and the first variant associated with this product, including the price, because we want to show the price in our extension. Then we're just setting this product to our local React state, and we are moving to the next step. There is some loading state, so skeleton components, some error handling components. We're using the use cart lines hook to get our current cart, because down below here, we are actually checking to see if the product is already in the cart. We don't want to offer it in the extension, so we just return null. By default, if there's also no product selected or no variants, we show null. So by default, you just don't show the extension. That's the best way to go. Finally, once we've kind of done all of our error handling and loading, we get to the point where we are pulling our images, title, and variants from the product. This is the response from the storefront request. And then we're using checkout UI components to actually build our widget in the checkout. So I will say this is also a completely separate set of components. It's not quite Polaris. You can't use any sort of standard HTML tags like divs. You have to use Shopify's own component library to build your checkout UI extension. I will say I had extreme difficulty just sizing an image when I tried to do this myself. So using this inline layout to actually size what you're putting in your extension, it's very helpful. This tutorial helped me a ton. So I would definitely recommend you reference this if you're looking to lay out your own custom extensions. All we're doing here is we're showing the product image. We're displaying the product title and the price. And then we have a button that's being used. If you go down here, this is just going to be used to add the product to our cart. In the onPress action, we're setting some React state, adding true and false. And in between that, we are using that apply cart line change to actually add that product to our cart. So the type, merchandise, and quantity, these are all defined by the Shopify tutorial, and it's just saying we want to add this one product to our cart. Fantastic. There's also a bit of error handling here, but largely that's all we need to do. So now we've made all of our changes to our extension, I'm going to go ahead and stop my dev app, I'm going to restart my dev app and we should be able to see our extension. I just need to restart it because I made changes to the TOML file, so it needs to pull in new configuration. Go ahead and load this up again, copy the URL for the checkout extension, paste it in, and we should see our extension. There we go. This is our Oxygen snowboard. This is the one we selected here in our admin app. If I go ahead and change it, let's go liquid, press save. This should update our metafield selection. So now if I refresh this page here, we should see the liquid snowboard being offered. Fantastic, that's great. So we know that that works. Now if we press the add button, it's added to the cart. So that's fantastic. We've effectively built our checkout UI extension. I am gonna walk through deploying this extension now. I'm gonna go back to my dev console here, and I am going to run deploy. So this will actually deploy all of our extensions. This is just a little tricky, so I want to show you how to do this. So we do want to deploy in the same way and deploy to push changes. And this will actually deploy our extension code to our partner's app. Like I said, Shopify hosts this code for us. So now if I go into the partner's dashboard, which I do not have open, let's go ahead and go back here. We can select our app, go to extensions, and we see we have our pre-purchase extension here. I want to create a version, so it'll just be a minor version bump. We can enable development store preview and then publish this version. And this will enable us to place our extension in our checkout without running our development app to test it out. So now if I go back to the store, I can go to settings, I can go to checkout, I can customize the current theme. And if I go ahead and add an app, I see this is my current app here. I can click it. I see my extension now. I can move it around on the page. Once I'm happy with where it is, maybe I'm happy right here, I can go ahead and press save. And now if I actually just go to my store, let's go through the admin here. I'm going to go ahead and remove this offer and let's check out. And so my dev app isn't running, remember, but I still get my extension. If I click add, it still works. So that's a good way to preview your extension after you've published it. This is exactly what it would look like if a merchant were to install my app on their store. So fantastic. So we've built our checkout UI extension app. For next steps, it might be nice to customize your admin app UI a little bit so that you can go ahead and, if we just open this up, select a variant or select an image. These are things you can do by editing your Shopify scope and models that were selected earlier. It might also be nice to use this pre-purchase product meta field to display what product is already selected in this admin app. So this admin app is pretty simple, lots of ways to customize and enhance it for merchants. If you have any questions about this tutorial, join our developer Discord to ask Gadget employees or the Gadget community, or check out our documentation. Until next time, I hope you keep building more and coding less with Gadget.